Asking for It, a novel approach. Episode 19, Chapter 77. When he returns the next day, Lance can't immediately locate Olivia Crane's office. He has questions about everything that preceded his strange night's dreams. When he finds the door, it's locked. He comes back again at a later hour on the following day, but the door is still locked. He flicks out his cell and calls, then messages her. Recorded digital disavowals of service as if the number had never existed. He double-checks, tries again, then just shakes his head. He enjoyed their brief encounter, however baffling its conclusion. Using his iPhone's browser, he retrieves the Skype number that they'd used. Deactivated. No trace. Vamoosed. Well, that sucks, he thinks. The sun is searing the back of his neck, so he pockets his phone to go. Then he notices a slightly weathered business card on the pavement at his feet. Beneath a fussy emblem comprising wings outstretched, a spoked wheel, and checkered flag, he reads, Phantom Motor Sales, specialists in vintage performance motorcycles. He turns it over. Handwritten there, on the other side, NOC Rally, Flagler Beach, 26th through the 29th. Bud's Tubs, room 16. The ink hasn't run, though the card is stained and curling at the edges, obviously having sat a while. Lance knows Flagler. It's not far up the coast past Fort Pierce, somewhere a little short of Daytona, as he recalls. He even recognizes the NOC, Norton Owners Club. All this trivia tumbles up from his childhood. All through Lance's upbringing, an embossed tin plate hung on the rear wall in their garage. NOC in the brand's fanciful script, silver on black. Unlike his son, Jensen Abierti had been mechanically inclined. He spent much of his free time in that garage. As a young man, before emigrating from England, he'd been an avid motorcyclist. He courted his wife to be on a bike. The motorcycles had not made the trip across the Atlantic with them. He exercised his automotive urges, maintaining the family's cars himself. To the many chests of mechanics' sockets and wrenches, over the years he'd added a woodshop's worth of power tools. He could have rebuilt their home from the ground up, had it ever been necessary. It was a source of enduring regret that Lance had never inherited those tools. His mother hastily sold the lot before Lance could return from faking university in L.A. Jensen Abierti died of stomach cancer in his late 40s. Even had Lance received those tools, he would have had to teach himself their uses. His father had guarded his time in the garage jealously, and did not pass along his craftsman's aptitude. Lance had come to Olivia Crane, however obliquely, to better himself. Standing there outside her locked door, in the burgeoning mid-morning sun, he experiences a fit of pique with the conventions, laws, and liabilities he's obeyed all his life. Olivia Crane apparently is not ruled by these conventions. He curses his polite habits, very nearly stamping his foot in childish exasperation. He looks again at the card in his hand. NOC, he says to himself, and shrugs. Why the hell not? 3 hours later, he's in Flagler Beach. The town is slightly larger than he recalls, but Lance finds Bud's Tubs without much trouble. It's a dumpy motel just north out of town on the coast road. There's a pool with a brackish-looking water, black and yellow danger tape wrapped around its entirety. A curving blue fiberglass slide ends in a jagged tear 2 feet short of the pool's edge. How the hell do you break something like that, he wonders. There are no bikes parked out front, but the surprisingly neat and attentive attendant in the office tells him they're all another mile up the road at Jimmy's. Jimmy's is an unkempt palm grove. It has an open, rusted gate draped with a crisp nylon flag bearing the Norton emblem. Lance pulls off the road and follows the crumbling coral, sand, and soil drive. The drive snakes between palms, around a curving inlet of still green water, delves into another stand of palms, and eventually reveals a small field of motorcycles, the occasional camping tent pitched in their midst. Men are ambling from bike to bike, or stand knotted in little groups around one or another vintage specimen. Lance parks the Panamera without attracting so much as a glance. He loosens his collar, opens his door, and places one shiny black wingtip shoe on the sand and scrub grass. Then he levers himself out of the car and into a balmy Atlantic midday breeze. He shucks his jacket immediately and tosses it back onto the passenger seat. There's a sliver of glimmering seascape visible through the trees. One throaty engine grumbles to life as another dies out. The men are mostly middle-aged, modestly and casually attired. Bike boots and jeans, t-shirts sporting bike brand logos, leather jackets open or thrown over the shoulder. There are a number of seniors among them, lifelong enthusiasts, no doubt. Some of them perhaps collectors. One spiffy old guy sporting a tweed cheese-cutter cap puts Lance in mind of Jim's streetheart. Conspicuous in the crowd are 2 younger dudes, bearded, tattooed, and stripped to the waist. They're making desultory efforts at constructing a pyramid from empty beer cans. Lance joins the tide of those circulating among the bikes, admiring, discussing, exchanging 2-wheeled war stories. Of the latter, Lance has none of any recent vintage. His father had not passed on the mechanic's knack, but as a teen, Lance did ride, and barely maintain a rattletrap little old Honda. There's a hand on his shoulder of a sudden. Lance turns to meet a wiry little man's grinning greeting. "Jimmy Jones! Well, welcome to the 7th annual Knockdown." He notes Lance's puzzlement and presses a cold can of Budweiser into his hand. "NOC, down, knockdown, nothing but Nortons. Just for the hay of it, you know? You ain't dressed to ride, so knock one down on me." Lance accepts the affable offer with surprise. "Well, thanks, Jimmy. Lance Abiarty. And you're right, I just drove up from Miami on a whim." "Why, that's just great, Lance. What do you think? Is that a bunch of beauties or what? Worth the drive?" They scan the crowd a moment, before a particularly loud roar erupts close behind them. A lean and aggressive Norton Commando sporting performance pipes in place of the stock exhaust system. Lance has to lean in close to hear his host. The Commando's owner opens the throttle twice more to deafening effect before letting the engine idle down to a loping rhythm of detonations. "How does that one grab you? Track ready and tuned, huh? Or is this honey more your style, Lance? Plenty of TLC in the detailing here. There's a couple of Dommies and an Atlas if your tastes run to the featherbed. There's even a P11 on the block this weekend, just over there behind the tents. Lance has not anticipated the used car lot welcome. Sure enough, he begins noticing the handmade for sale signs stuck on several of the bikes. Well, you know, Jimmy, I hadn't really thought about buying when I decided to come up. My old man rode a Norton back in the 50s in England. Oh, well, Lance, right? Lance, you said? Yeah. Well, don't take it personal now if I tell you. But you got it written all over you. What? Like a sell me your bike sign on my back? Well, not exactly. No, it's more like a seeking soulmate kind of thing. Well, they both laugh at that. Don't take offense, but I'd bet your bottom dollar you need one of these to call your own. But don't worry, it's an affliction well known in this company. And best of all, it's a good time to be looking. The economy tanking and all. The toys are, as always, the very first things to go. Lance smiles, indulging the man, but he's already begun wondering if this Jimmy might not be right. Under the circumstances, 50 years of age, recent infatuation with a 20-something woman, he assesses the likelihood of midlife crisis. They are still moving between the rows of bikes, Jimmy and Lance, Jimmy holding forth on various bike-related subjects, but he commands only a limited percentage of Lance's attention. And then they're standing in front of a thing of true beauty, sleeker, higher tech, obviously a more modern machine than the rest. Ho, 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 begins Jimmy. An excellent choice. This one will cost you real money, though. Rare. Not even for sale that I know of. Lance doesn't budge. He doesn't look up. May not even have heard the voluble Jimmy. The little guy guesses as much. Dirk Bergstrom, I think. I'll see if I can find him. And Jimmy is off. Lance remains there, engrossed. He is looking at something that makes his Panamera seem a little tame. Design-wise, the Norton 961 gives an impression equal parts robust and refined. The glossy black hump to its outsized fuel tank transitions wickedly back to a lean seat above the chiseled machinery of engine, transmission, and chain case. Every metal surface looks to have been anodized. The fat, inverted forks that hold the front wheel are definitely anodized. They have a rich, golden velvet finish to them, metal you could kiss. There's a bit of branding there, Öhlins. Lance doesn't know the name, but recognizes the performance automotive manufacturer's strategy of outsourcing certain systems to the established pros, rather than doing any of it less well themselves. So the shocks are by Öhlins. He looks to the brakes, and sure enough, he finds there the same Brembos that his Porsche sports. This black and chrome beauty's many grace notes of machined yellow alloy begin with its deep mag wheel rims. In his mind, these rims speed over a blur of pavement, curving and banking around life's every obstacle. Chapter 78. They're across the street from the alleyway entrance to Manfred's rented room. Mid-morning heat and traffic noise slowly build around them. He almost disappears, blending into the graffiti-bombed wall of the building he's leaning against. Ruth Ann doesn't see him right away when she turns from paying their cab. They're here to collect a few of his things. Meekness has grudgingly accepted her invitation to convalesce in Charlie's cottage on the canal. She has it for 2 months. There's no point in his leading a struggling and solitary existence, one-handed for all intents and purposes, while she has free time and the comfy little house on the canal all to herself. They haven't seen each other for nearly 20 years, after all. I'll be in and out in a jiff. Manfred, you can't lift and carry with your bad arm. That's why I'm here, for goodness sake. Ah, but I have only a small yet potent portable computer to carry. Come on, you've got to at least grab a few more things to wear. Actually, I usually just wash these ones. Oh my God. Go on then, I'll wait here. But if you've got a woman in there, at least do her the justice of leaving my number. I can't bear the flattery. Just 1 minute. Manfred spins around to cross the street. She has her hand on his good arm before he can collide with another e-bike gliding silently past. The false start gives him a jolt of pain in his shoulder. Ruth Ann sighs as he gimps off cautiously across the street. Sure enough, he returns after some minutes, carrying nothing more than a tattered little army surplus bag, presumably containing his laptop. The star of a briefly popular sitcom defers to Ruth Ann with a broad, white grin. She hadn't even noticed that they competed for the attention of the same passing cab. With her previously loved goods stowed safely aboard, Ruth Ann gives the guy a polite wave of thanks before climbing in herself. Beauty before celebrity, as it should be. It's as if there's been some reordering of the universe with your return to L.A. That guy? He's an actor? That might be a stretch. Let's say that, lacking a muse, but with the assistance, no doubt, of an agent surrogate, he did find a place in the hokum firmament of network television for a season or two. She is regarding him with too much curiosity again. She always was one of your favorite subjects. The muse. A figure of speech. I've meant nothing special by that term for many a year now. A muse is nothing more than animal instinct. The twist in one's gut as an idea demands its concrete expression. Wow, I've been waiting and wondering when I'd see the new Manfred. You've been eerily unchanged until now. As ever, unrecognized for my many talents, but unchanged? Surely not. You once told me I'd propel mankind's evolution through sheer force of my inspiration. One lucky man at a time, I believe, was how you put it. Does sound muse-like. I do recall it. But doing the muse's bidding, the successful artist simply performs his share of the million tasks essential to our species' survival. For short, I'd still call it instincts. Well, I think that's what's changed about you. You've become a survivor, Manfred. I'm not sure it's good for you. I remember you were much more of a thriver. Bearing the weight of this pronouncement with some chagrin, Manfred says no more on the subject. The remaining 2 blocks to the canals flash past the cab's windows. The 40-odd buildings on his side of this particular block punctuate an eon in Manfred's thinking. The end of the street finds him accepting what feels remarkably like a second revelation of his writerly calling. In a single, clever, compound phrase, Ruth Ann has revived in him a sense of the self he's disparaged, in truth all but discarded over the past several years. Permission to thrive. Once again, he suspects Ruth Ann of hiding wings within that well-worn leather coat she seems to favor. Her sudden reappearance in Los Angeles is a fortuitous sign and no doubt. The flip side of the sign reads, "Use it or lose it." For good this time, he thinks with a shudder. Ruth Ann is truly a dream, the tempting mirage haunting his subconscious, as well as the improbable reality of her. She has him swearing oaths to the gods. The cab has stopped. Manfred wonders at the strange new light that seems to bathe everything before him. When he's struggled free of the back seat, she's waiting for him there on the sidewalk. The Venus of Venice Beach. Not the bikini-clad co-ed that emerged from the waves all those years ago, but not one iota less miraculous. The Best Laid Plans. Chapter 79. Founder of a humanitarian society and controller of a considerable financial trust, despite his broad associations and a genuinely affable nature, at 66 years of age, Jims has few friends. In his average day, he sees no one more familiar than the barber that has shaved him for almost 30 years. Compounding Jims's solitude is his lifelong aversion to telephones. He genuinely dislikes the sensation of communicating with someone remotely. It is an affront of sorts. He already feels woefully divorced from the past, that flawed but wonder-filled tale belonging properly and equally to all. Sharing the present should not depend on simulations such as telephone calls, much less the uncanny abstraction he understands as electronic mail. To accept that it does saddens him. Why has he never married? True, he can be called eccentric, an incurable aesthete even, but can he possibly be unworthy of companionship out and out? He's always felt short on the qualities that might attract a mate for life. He's also felt, so unreasonably felt, as though marrying a woman represents a great imposition to her. What underpins a marriage, if not the mingling of two minds, of sentiment and compatible inclinations? In Jims's mind abides the willful notion of inadequacy. His part in such a marriage would only amount to mere subterfuge. Jims still pines after the little group of friends he'd attracted during his brief days at Oxford. One by one, each drifted from their communal project in the Society for Devolution of Men's Powers. 5 of the 6 had married within 3 years of graduation, including their firebrand, Constance Breckenridge. After the heady days of its inception, the society had remained unfortunately exclusive. Eventually, it was judged too cloistered, even by its longer-standing, more faithful adherents. Rumors of cultish elements complicated an already uneven reputation. A brief and regret-filled conversation was all that attended each friend and member's departure from Jims's life. Having lost courage for their truer anti-chauvinist convictions, the once fervent collaborators fell out of Jims's increasingly rarefied sphere. Jims took endless pains to ensure the society survived its growing pains. Grow and endure as it did, the membership never again included true friends for its founder. Things are not altogether well with the society of late. The rebranding, new directions Maxine has insisted upon. He hasn't felt so well himself. Tired. Maxine is doubtless correct, but Jims desperately wants someone to talk with. On a little shelf nearest the mullioned windows of his breakfast nook, there's a wire mesh tray. In the tray, a leather-bound address book, 2 pencils, and an elegant brass pencil sharpener. On the wall above the shelf is mounted a black rotary-dial telephone. His need to speak with a friend has trumped Jim's phobia of telephones. With a sigh ending in a groan, Jims opens the address book. This slender sheaf of contacts has an unmistakable whiff of the archival about it. Another artifact, Jims muses, fit for Lance's museum. Neatly noted in his compact handwriting, tellingly crisp below the fading names and addresses preceding it, Lance Abierti. Dear good Lance. Jims takes a receiver from the cradle and with his free hand's forefinger begins describing the series of semicircles that will put him in touch with his friend. Abierti has always seemed to enjoy the role of mentored young accomplice. Today, Jims hopes he will embrace a role reversal. Jims is baffled by his chief executive officer's increasing coolness. At the helm of Recalculate, Maxine Castigliani has begun confounding his expectations. He isn't actually reconsidering Maxine. In her executive capacity, her credentials there are impeccable. Still, he needs to feel a degree more fellowship with her. He can't put his finger on the trouble. Is she pursuing some divergent agenda? No, that's not likely it. It's not her loyalty he craves so much as her approval. Jims mentally rehearses his reasoning. He wants Lance to understand this call for tea and sympathy has more substantial grounds. A young woman, professional and polite, informs Jims that Lance Abierti is traveling. He has entrusted a portion of his business to her, and for expediency, this line along with it. She offers to pass along his particulars and any message he cares to leave. Her tone is so pleasant, obliging in the manner so seldom encountered these days, he can't attempt even finagling Lance's whereabouts. He asks merely that Lance call his friend, Jim's streetheart. Jims shuffles off from his kitchen through dim corridors to staircase landing and the front door, trailing sighs which he hears with the impatience of some underpaid caregiver. Without real thought for appearance, he chooses shoes, hat, gloves, and a coat. Without enthusiasm, he sets out early to walk downtown for his shave.